So, in the United States, there is this thing called the debt ceiling, and we're coming up to a big fight on it. And there's all this conversation about what we can cut in the budget to allow the debt ceiling to rise. So this whole debt ceiling fight is a ruse. Okay, it's subterfuge to take away from you, the hardworking American, things that you deserve and are entitled to. Okay, so let's back up for a second. What is the debt ceiling? So the debt ceiling is an arbitrary cap that the U.S. government has said that we can have this much debt and no more. Okay, and keep in mind that two things. One, the debt ceiling is about paying bills that we've already spent, right? So you can't go to a restaurant and say, oh, well, my debt ceiling was $100, but this bill is $130. So here's $100. I'm not gonna pay the rest of the bill. No, you won't be allowed to come back to that restaurant. Maybe that restaurateur tells their friends and they kick you out of their restaurants. Same basic thing, but on a larger scale. If the United States does not pay its tab or doesn't pay all of its tab, then you're going to send the entire world into chaos. The stock market and the currency will collapse because trust in the US dollar, which, by the way, the sovereignty of the strength of the dollar is tied to the sovereignty of our ability to pay debts, right? Because it's a fiat currency. So it's only as strong as our government's ability to pay debts and negotiate the dollar's use around the world. That's what causes a fiat currency's strength to increase. So if we didn't pass it, we essentially destroy the global economy because the US is the global reserve currency. If that collapses, it's like the foundation of a house collapsing. Everything else falls underneath it, okay? And the second point is, the second point that this is all a ruse is they're going to pass it anyway. There doesn't actually need to be any concessions because they're donors and their personal stock, and there would be holy hell in this country if we actually did not pay our debts. And this isn't like the government shuts down a little bit, right? This isn't like the sequester, which wasn't great either. But no, this is about like everyone watching this video and everyone in the country who uses the dollar, like our money essentially becomes worthless like overnight. It would be a catastrophe, okay? So all of this is a ruse. They have to pass it. And by the way, they're going to pass it. What's happening now is Republicans think, hey, we want to cut Social Security and Medicare anyway, or privatize it or do something terrible with it. So we can force the Democrats, by the way, a lot of them want to do it too. They're just lying to you, okay? Force the Democrats to give us these concessions that we want about Social Security and Medicare and these other social safety net programs in exchange for us voting on the debt ceiling. But there's a simple solution, guys, Democrats, just call their bluff. No Republican will allow this to go. So that you might get some no votes, all right? You're gonna get some no votes, that's fair. But you are absolutely not under any circumstances going to get enough no votes to make it not happen because they're playing with fire. If we don't get this done in time, again, it will collapse the entire economy. Not just for the US, but for the world. And look, our politicians are bought and sold by very rich people who make their money in the stock market. Their donors are not going to allow them to do this. So it's just posturing, guys. Here's another thing, right? First of all, we should not have a debt ceiling, right? I think if you think about it logically, we as a country should always pay the bills that we have already accrued. If you want to talk about how we spend money going forward, okay, I think there's reasonable discussions to be had about how we spend our money every year. That's totally fair. However, once we have paid those, once we have purchased those services, once we have sent that money out, borrowed that money, we have to pay it back. As a country, it doesn't make any sense to do it any other way. And so we really should just get rid of the debt ceiling because, like the government funding, it's just an excuse to get concessions out of the party in power. And that's all it really is. All this is a giant ruse, okay? It's not Don't let people fool you into thinking this is a real fight. This is a fake fight being engineered for whatever cuts to social safety net programs that the Republicans can get out of the Democrats. And by the way, that some of the Democrats can kind of secretly get in because they're really conservatives or they're bribed to feel this particular way. And by the way, so how do we get debts, right? We get deficits, right? So we spend more than we bring in. By the way, guys, deficits are a good thing, all right? This whole idea about balancing the budget to reduce and to try and reduce the debt, it's total nonsense. First of all, the debt is so high that we'll never get it down anyway. So that's kind of a silly point. This debt is debt we've been, and I think it's what, 10 trillion, 16 trillion? I don't know the exact number. I haven't checked in a really long time, so apologies on that. But like the debt, the national debt is so high. We've been accumulating it for over 200 years. We are never, ever, ever, ever going to get rid of it. So pretending like, having a couple of years where we bring in more money than we spend is going to suddenly fix things is total nonsense. Plus, government spending is typically tied to government deficits are typically tied to prospering in the private sector. So when the government spends lots of money and it makes it cheap to borrow and things like that, then the economy really gets revving and growing because people borrow money and they invest in projects and they execute on capitalism, how capitalism is kind of sort of supposed to work, right? Money comes in, you spend it, you invest in a project, you reap the rewards of that project, and then you come back and on it goes, right? And then you lend out, you pay your money back. The banks have made some, the government's made some. It all works, okay? It all works. But if you squeeze that or you raise interest rates, you make it harder, then the economy doesn't grow, right? That's kind of what we're working with now with all this stuff. But so the government is kind of incentivized to spend money, which is why we so frequently have deficits, which, by the way, is a good thing. We should always have deficits. I know it doesn't sound good on paper, but guys, and I've said this before, the government is not like you or me. The government doesn't go into their wallet, see if they have a 20 to pay the bill when it comes time. The government makes money appear out of thin air, out of the credit of the US government. They say, oh, we need $1 billion. Great. Here's $1 billion. We just created it. We either printed it or we added a zero somewhere on a digital ledger, and that's how much more currency exists in the world. Now, is it possible to overdo it? Yes, there is. But it's really hard, especially when there's so much money out there and most people don't really feel it. You can have hyperinflation, you can have all these other things, but that's not really what's going on here. And by the way, the government, if they're really concerned about how much money they're spending, they can raise taxes, specifically on corporations, the rich, the people who have the most money, who can afford to pay the most in taxes, as opposed to squeezing it out of programs like Social Security and Medicare, which, although they are paying people money, are not often enough to keep people out of poverty anyway. So to come back to the original conversation here, I want you to take a couple points away. One, deficits are inherently positive. Having the government run deficits leads to growth in the economy for regular Joes and Janes like you and me, okay? The second thing I want you to keep in mind is that this debt limit fight is a total ruse. Any negotiation that gets done here is really just done at the benefit of the donors and for the punitive desires of the Republican Party, who wants to take away your Social Security and Medicare before you can even get there. And three, the debt ceiling fight is ridiculous anyway, because no one would truthfully allow for the government to destroy the entire economy by not paying its debts. And that brings me to the last point. We should advocate as regular citizens to our elected leaders that there should be no debt limit anyway. We should just abolish the debt limit, because no one would sanction the borrowing of huge amounts of money and then not paying it back. One, because it's irresponsible, and two, because, as I said earlier, it will crater the entire US economy. So if you take those points from this conversation and, any other news watching you do and anything like that, just keep this in mind, guys, because all of this is it's political theater. It's to make it look like there's real governing going on. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I said that Biden's term was over. It is, man. We're done here. Nothing's going to get done. okay, between now and the next general election. Kick back, relax, don't worry about it. Will I still have topics to talk about? Yes, I will. Don't worry about that. But this debt ceiling hike and the government funding, it's all just theater. It all gets done anyway. And by the way, any deals that come out of that are going to be pulled directly out of you and my pockets. So when you hear bipartisanship, check for your wallet because they're coming for it. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. All right, guys, see you next time. Bye for now.